Utter humiliation threatened to consume Rosalind as she sat unchaperoned and outcast in high society's glittering dining hall. Suddenly cold silk brushed her bare arm. An elderly aristocrat slid into the booth, her voice a desperate hiss. "Smile brilliantly, my dear. Tonight you are my nephew's beloved bride-to-be." Gaslight flickered against the crystal chandeliers of the Langham Hotel, casting a warm, golden glow over London's most ruthless battlefield, the Grand Dining Room. It was the winter of 1883, a season where reputations were forged and shattered between courses of roasted pheasant and spun sugar desserts. Rosalind Fairchild sat alone at a corner table, staring at the intricate silver pattern on her dessert fork, praying the plush velvet curtains would somehow swallow her whole. Dining unchaperoned in such an establishment was a severe breach of etiquette, yet she had no choice. Her employer, the notoriously absent-minded Mrs. Haverham, had dashed out in a panic over a misplaced emerald brooch, leaving Rosalind a mere governess stranded among the wolves of polite society. She was no stranger to these wolves. Only 3 years prior, Rosalind had been one of them. She was the cherished daughter of Baron Fairchild, destined to marry into a comfortable, respected lineage. But a catastrophic failure in her father's shipping investments had swept away their fortune overnight, leaving the family destitute, and her father broken. The swiftness of her social exile had been staggering. The invitations ceased. The warm smiles turned to icy stares, and worst of all, Lord Frederick Astor, the man who had sworn eternal devotion to her, had broken their engagement via a terse, cowardly letter delivered by a footman. Now through the sea of taffeta and tailored evening coats she saw him. Frederick was seated 3 tables away, flanked by his sycophantic friends. His pale, sharp eyes found hers, and his lips curled into a cruel, knowing smirk. He leaned over, whispering something to his companion, who promptly erupted into a cruel, braying laugh. The sound pierced the low hum of the dining room, a hot needle of shame driving straight into Rosalind's chest. She lifted her chin, refusing to let the tears stinging her eyes fall, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the silk of her worn, twice-mended evening gown. She was moments away from fleeing into the freezing December night when the rustle of heavy silk announced an unexpected arrival. A woman of formidable presence slid smoothly into the vacant velvet bench opposite Rosalind. She was draped in midnight blue velvet, a collar of spectacular diamonds resting against her throat. Her silver hair was piled high in an impeccable coiffure, and she leaned heavily on an ebony cane topped with a silver griffin. Rosalind's breath hitched. She recognized the matriarch instantly. Lady Bessie Stanhope, the Dowager Countess of Lichfield. She was an undisputed titan of the ton, a woman whose mere whisper could launch a debutante to the pinnacle of society or cast a family into permanent obscurity. "Do not look so utterly terrified," child Lady Bessie murmured, her voice carrying the dry, crisp authority of autumn leaves. She did not look at Rosalind directly. Instead, she gave a polite, aristocratic nod toward an empty corner of the room, as though greeting an old friend. "I require a favor, and you, Miss Fairchild, require a miracle." Rosalind blinked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "My lady, I'm afraid you have mistaken me for someone else. I am simply, you are Rosalind Fairchild, daughter of the late Baron Fairchild, currently employed as a glorified nanny for the Haverhams, a position that is beneath your intellect and your breeding." Lady Bessie interrupted seamlessly, her dark eyes flashing with sharp intelligence. "I know precisely who you are. More importantly, I know you are currently the target of Frederick Astor's pathetic ridicule, a man whose spine is composed entirely of damp paper. Now listen to me very carefully." Lady Bessie leaned forward, the scent of expensive lavender water and old wealth enveloping them. "In approximately 3 minutes, my nephew will enter this dining room. The dowager whispered her tone, dropping an octave into something urgent and perilous. He has just returned from an extended tour of the continent, and he is walking straight into an ambush. Lady Montgomery and her dreadful screeching parakeet of a daughter Cressida are lying in wait near the vestibule. Lady Montgomery has bribed a waiter to spill soup on Cressida the moment my nephew approaches, ensuring he is forced to escort her to a private parlour to recover. Once the door closes, Lady Montgomery will scream compromise. He will be forced to marry the girl by the end of the week. Rosalind's eyes widened at the sheer audacity of the scheme. It was a classic trap, brutal and legally binding in the eyes of their suffocating social circles. Why are you telling me this? My lady, because my nephew is Abraham William Kelly, the Duke of Kelly. Bessie replied, her grip tightening on her griffin-headed cane. And I will see him dragged behind a carriage through Hyde Park before I let him marry a Montgomery. He needs a shield, a definitive, undeniable reason to walk right past that dreadful woman and her snare. The Countess turned her piercing gaze fully upon Rosalind. When Abraham arrives at this table, you will smile brilliantly. You will look at him with the profound, sickening devotion of a woman deeply in love. Because, as of this very second, Miss Fairchild, you are going to pretend you are my nephew's fiancée. Rosalind gasped softly, leaning back against the velvet cushion. A duke. My lady, that is impossible. No one would believe it. I have nothing. Look at me. My gown is 3 seasons old. I am unchaperoned, and society considers me ruined. The scandal. The scandal is exactly what will make it believable, Bessie hissed, leaning closer. A secret, passionate romance born out of defiance. It is positively scandalous, which means London society will devour it without questioning the logistics. They love a tragic heroine swept off her feet. Now I am not asking you to do this out of the goodness of your heart. Play your part convincingly tonight. Keep the Montgomery clause out of my family. And tomorrow morning, a sum of £10,000 will be deposited into an account under your name, along with the deed to a very comfortable, very private estate in Cornwall. £10,000. It was an astronomical sum. It was salvation. It was independence. It meant her younger sister, currently suffering in a miserable charity school, could have a proper education and a comfortable life. It meant Rosalind would never have to endure the sneers of men like Frederick Astor ever again. She glanced across the room. Frederick was still watching her, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, waiting for her to break. A sudden fierce wave of defiance washed over her. What must I do? Rosalind asked, her voice steadying. Lady Bessie's lips curved into a sharp, victorious smile. Excellent girl. Just follow his lead. And whatever you do, do not let Cressida see you flinch. He appeared at the grand archway of the dining room exactly 3 minutes later, cutting through the crowded floor like a warship parting a calm sea. Abraham William Kelly, the Duke of Kelly, was a man who commanded the very air around him. He possessed the dark, brooding colouring of the Kelly line, thick raven hair perfectly swept back, and eyes the colour of a stormy winter sky. His tailoring was immaculate, a stark charcoal evening coat that emphasized the unnatural breadth of his shoulders and his towering height. But it was his demeanour that caused a ripple of hushed whispers to sweep through the room. The Ice Duke! Society called him. He looked endlessly bored, completely unapproachable and undeniably lethal. As he strode toward their table, Rosalind felt a sudden spike of sheer panic. He did not look like a man who would appreciate a spontaneous, fabricated betrothal to a disgraced baron's daughter. Remember, Bessie, whispered from the side of her mouth, her posture completely relaxed as she sipped her water. Adoring devotion. Abraham reached the table. He barely glanced at Rosalind, at first focusing his intense, stormy gaze entirely on his aunt. Aunt Bessie. You summoned me with the urgency of a national crisis. I abandoned a perfectly adequate game of billiards. This had better be important. Oh, it is. Abraham, darling. Bessie said, her voice dripping with maternal warmth that was so fake, Rosalind nearly flinched. The dowager gestured grandly toward Rosalind. I am simply delighted you made it in time to join us. You remember your fiancée, Miss Fairchild, do you not? Abraham froze. The silence that stretched between the three of them was absolute, heavy, with the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions. The Duke slowly turned his head, his gaze finally locking onto Rosalind. His eyes swept over her, taking in her outdated mended dress, her pale, terrified face, and the defiant lift of her chin. For a fleeting second, an emotion flashed in his dark eyes. It wasn't anger, it was the sharp assessing calculation of a master tactician evaluating a sudden shift on the chessboard. Before he could speak, Lady Bessie kicked him sharply under the table. Lady Montgomery is waiting by the east vestibule with a bowl of oxtail soup and a compromised daughter. Bessie murmured so quietly, only the three of them could hear. Play along, Abraham, or you will be buying Cressida a diamond ring by breakfast. Abraham's jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck jumped, but the transformation that followed was nothing short of miraculous. The cold, unapproachable Ice Duke vanished. In his place emerged a man, deeply, fiercely enraptured. He stepped forward, bridging the distance between them, and reached out to take Rosalind's trembling, gloveless hand. His skin was warm, his grip firm and anchoring. My apologies, my darling Abraham, said his voice, a rich, dark baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down Rosalind's spine. He bowed low over her hand, brushing his lips against her knuckles. I was detained by tedious men, and their even more tedious politics. I have been counting the seconds until I could see you again. Rosalind's breath caught. He was alarmingly good at this. You are forgiven, Your Grace. Rosalind managed forcing a breathless smile that felt genuine due to sheer adrenaline. She looked up into his eyes, remembering Bessie's instruction. Adoring devotion. She softened her gaze, leaning slightly toward him, as if drawn by a magnetic pull. I was beginning to fear you had forgotten me. Never, he murmured softly, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. The intimacy of the gesture was startling. Shall we take a walk through the palm court, my love? The air in here is growing dreadfully stagnant. A splendid idea, Bessie chimed in loudly, drawing the attention of the surrounding tables. Show off your lovely bride, Abraham. Let society see what a lucky man you are. Abraham offered Rosalind his arm. She took it, feeling the solid, dense muscle beneath his finely tailored sleeve. As they turned to walk out of the booth, the entire dining room seemed to fall silent. The whispers began almost instantly, a collective gasp rippling through the elite crowd as they realized the most eligible bachelor in the empire was arm in arm with the ruined daughter of Baron Fairchild. Rosalind kept her head high, matching his long, deliberate strides. You are shaking, Miss Fairchild? Abraham murmured, his lips barely moving, as he kept a brilliant, loving smile plastered on his face. I am terrified, Your Grace, she whispered back, nodding politely to a shocked dowager as they passed. Do not be. I am not angry with you. I assume my aunt threatened, bribed, or blackmailed you into this a bribe. Mostly, Rosalind confessed, surprised by her own honesty. £10,000 and an estate in Cornwall. Abraham let out a low, rough chuckle that sounded genuinely amused. My aunt always did overpay for a quick fix, but considering you just saved me from a lifetime of listening to Cressida Montgomery play the harp, I consider it a bargain. They rounded the corner toward the Palm Court, a lush, glass-ceilinged promenade filled with exotic ferns and string quartets, And there, standing precisely where Bessie had predicted, was the ambush. Lady Montgomery, a woman resembling an overfed pigeon in mauve silk, stood blocking the pathway. Beside her was Cressida, clutching a fan and looking expectant. As Abraham and Rosalind approached, Lady Montgomery's eyes darted between them, her face draining of colour as she registered the intimate way Rosalind clung to the Duke's arm. Duke Kelly. Lady Montgomery gasped, entirely abandoning her script. Who? What is the meaning of this? Who is this woman hanging upon your arm? Abraham stopped pulling Rosalind, just a fraction closer to his side, presenting a united, impenetrable front. Lady Montgomery Abraham said smoothly, his tone returning to freezing politeness. Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Miss Rosalind Fairchild. We prefer to keep our private affairs out of the scandalous rags, but as we are among friends, we decided tonight was the perfect evening to celebrate our impending union. Cressida let out a strangled squeak, dropping her fan. Fiancée, but she is penniless. Her father is a ruined man. She is a nobody. The crude outburst echoed in the quiet promenade. Rosalind felt a flash of old shame, but Abraham's hand tightened over hers, anchoring her to the present. He did not speak. He didn't need to. He simply looked at Rosalind, yielding the floor to her. Taking a deep breath, Rosalind channeled every ounce of her aristocratic upbringing, the education she had maintained even in poverty. She offered Cressida a smile of profound, devastating pity. Wealth can be lost in a day. Miss Montgomery, as my family unfortunately learned, Rosalind said, her voice crystalline, carrying perfectly over the polite hum of the room. But grace, intellect, and dignity are inherent. They cannot be bought, nor can they be stolen. And they certainly cannot be fabricated by splashing soup on a gentleman in a hallway. Lady Montgomery gasped, taking a step back as if physically struck. The nearby patrons, who had been eavesdropping mercilessly, let out a collective hushed murmur of shock and amusement. Come, darling, Abraham said, looking down at Rosalind with a gaze so filled with fabricated pride it made her heart skip a beat. We have champagne to drink. As they swept past the sputtering Montgomerys, Rosalind caught movement from the corner of her eye. Lord Frederick Astor had followed them into the promenade. He stood frozen by a potted palm, staring at Rosalind with an expression of absolute horror and dawning realization. The woman he had discarded like trash was now holding the arm of the most powerful peer in the realm. The karma had only just begun to circle back, and as Rosalind met Frederick's eyes, she didn't look away. She smiled sharp and victorious before turning her face back to the Duke. That was magnificent, Abraham murmured, as they reached the sanctuary of the far balcony, hidden behind a cascade of orchids. He let go of her arm, but the heat of his touch remained. He looked at her, really looked at her, his storm-grey eyes stripping away the layers of her ruined reputation to see the fierce, unbroken woman beneath. Who exactly are you, Miss Fairchild? I am your fiancée, your grace, she replied softly, the lines between reality and charade already beginning to blur, at least for tonight. Gossip is the lifeblood of London society, and for 3 glorious weeks the whirlwind romance between the Ice Duke and the disgraced Baron's daughter dominated every drawing room from Mayfair to Belgravia. The charade, initially born of sheer desperation, and Lady Bessie's tactical genius, had rapidly morphed into an unbreakable alliance. Rosalind Fairchild no longer wore mended taffeta. Financed by a discreet ironclad contract with the Kelly estate, she was draped in Parisian silks and heirloom sapphires, attending the season's most exclusive events on the arm of Abraham William Kelly. To the glittering ton, they were the epitome of an intoxicating love match. Yet behind the heavy mahogany doors of Kelly House, the lines between their fabricated devotion and a terrifying, undeniable reality were beginning to blur. Abraham's lingering touches, the way his stormy eyes darkened when she laughed, and the fierce, possessive grip of his hand upon her waist during waltzes felt violently real. Rosalind found herself dreading the day the season would end, the day their contract would expire, and she would be sent away to the promised estate in Cornwall. The ultimate test of their performance arrived in late January. Invitations had been issued to Marlborough House for a grand winter ball, hosted by His Royal Highness Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales. It was a dizzying display of royal excess, teeming with real historical power players. Lady Randolph Churchill was holding court near the punch bowls, her legendary wit drawing crowds, while Consuelo Isnaga, the formidable Duchess of Manchester, surveyed the room through a diamond-encrusted lorgnette. Rosalind, resplendent in an ivory satin gown embroidered with silver thread, stood near the terrace doors, momentarily separated from Abraham, who had been cornered by the prince for a discussion on naval fleet expansions. The crisp winter air seeped through the glass panes, offering a brief respite from the suffocating heat of 1,000 wax candles. She was entirely unprepared for the viper waiting in the shadows. A breathtaking ascent, Rosalind, a slick, venomous voice murmured from behind the velvet drapes. From a destitute governess to the future Duchess of Kelly in under a month. It is a fairy tale. Pity I know exactly how to burn the storybook to ashes. Rosalind froze. Lord Frederick Astor stepped out from the alcove, his face flushed with champagne and bitter, consuming envy. The man who had callously broken her heart 3 years ago now looked at her with a dangerous mix of desperation and malice. His tailored suit could not hide the frantic, manic energy vibrating through him. "You have no power here." "Lord Astor, Rosalind," said her voice, dripping with the icy poise she had learned from the Duke. She turned to leave, but Frederick moved swiftly, blocking her path to the ballroom. "I have more power than you could possibly fathom," Frederick hissed, pulling a folded sheaf of parchment from his breast pocket. "Did you truly believe society would just accept your miraculous return? I have spent the last 3 weeks digging into your father's ruined shipping empire. And look what my investigators discovered." He waved the papers inches from her face. "These are forged ledgers, Rosalind. Sworn affidavits from dockmasters and financiers. They detail how Baron Fairchild did not merely lose his fortune to bad investments. They prove he embezzled thousands of pounds from the Crown's maritime funds before he died. Treason, embezzlement, and fraud. The blood drained from Rosalind's face. That is a lie. My father was an honourable man. His debts were settled. You fabricated these. Of course I did." Frederick smiled, a cruel, ugly stretching of his lips. "But the press will not care. The Pall Mall Gazette will print it by tomorrow afternoon. The scandal will not just ruin your dead father's name, it will completely destroy the Duke of Kelly's impeccable reputation. He will be forced to cast you into the gutter where you belong." Rosalind's breath hitched. She could endure her own ruin, she had survived it once before. But Abraham, the man who had shielded her, who had looked at her with genuine respect and fiery admiration, she couldn't let his noble house be dragged through the mud because of her. "What do you want?" she whispered, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. Frederick's eyes gleamed with greedy triumph. "My own investments have suffered terribly lately. I require a loan. £50,000 drawn directly from the Duke's private accounts, delivered to me by tomorrow morning. You will convince him to pay it, or I destroy you both." Before Rosalind could formulate a response, a shadow fell over them. The temperature in the alcove seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "You are making a profound miscalculation." Astor, a low, lethal baritone, resonated through the shadows. Abraham emerged from the ballroom's glow, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. His storm-grey eyes were locked onto Frederick, and he moved with the predatory grace of a wolf cornering a wounded stag. Lady Bessie's lessons in social warfare paled in comparison to the sheer, unadulterated menace radiating from the Ice Duke. Frederick stumbled backward, hurriedly stuffing the forged ledgers back into his pocket. "Your Grace, I was merely catching up with an old acquaintance. You were attempting to extort my fiancé," Abraham corrected smoothly, stepping protectively in front of Rosalind. He did not raise his voice, but the deadly quiet of his tone was far more terrifying than a shout. "You threatened her father's legacy and, by extension, my own house. It is a bold strategy for a man who is utterly bankrupt." Frederick's face turned the color of ash. Do not insult my intelligence," Abraham interrupted. He reached inside his own tailored evening coat and produced a crisp, heavily stamped document. "When Rosalind first mentioned your name at the Langham, I took the liberty of looking into your sudden interest in my affairs. You see, Astor, a man of my station does not merely react to threats, he preempts them." Abraham casually tossed the document onto a silver-side table. "Those are your promissory notes. Every single gambling debt, every failed investment, every desperate loan you have taken out over the past 3 years. I bought them all yesterday afternoon from Boring Brothers and Company. I own your estates, your townhouse, and the very clothes on your miserable back." Rosalind gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. The sheer scale of Abraham's retaliation was staggering. He had not just protected her, he had meticulously dismantled her greatest tormentor. You cannot do this." Frederick stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. The forged ledgers in his pocket were suddenly worthless. A bankrupt man peddling rumours against the most powerful peer in England would be laughed out of Fleet Street. "I already have," Abraham said, his voice laced with freezing finality. "If you ever speak to Rosalind again, if you ever so much as look in her direction, or if a single whisper of her father's name reaches the press, I will call in every debt immediately. You will be dragged from your bed and thrown into Fleet Prison before dawn. Now get out of my sight." Frederick did not say another word. Stripped of his pride, his wealth, and his vengeance, he turned and fled the alcove, disappearing into the crowded ballroom like a ghost banished to the dark. Silence descended upon the terrace. The distant strains of a Strauss waltz drifted through the glass doors, mingling with the erratic beating of Rosalind's heart. Abraham turned to her, the terrifying ice in his demeanour instantly melting into something warm, vulnerable, and profoundly gentle. He reached out his gloved hands, gently cupping her face. "Did he hurt you?" Abraham asked, his thumb brushing a stray curl from her cheek. "No," Rosalind breathed, looking up into the storm-grey eyes she had come to adore. "You bought his debts? All of them, Abraham, that must have cost a fortune. He insulted my future Duchess. He is lucky I did not challenge him to a duel in Hyde Park," Abraham murmured, stepping closer until the heavy silk of her gown brushed against his tailored legs. Rosalind looked down her heart, aching with a sudden sharp sorrow. "But I am not your future Duchess, Abraham. The season is nearly over. Our contract." "Damn the contract," Abraham whispered fiercely. He dropped to one knee, right there on the marble floor of the royal terrace. The gaslight caught the sharp angles of his face, illuminating the absolute sincerity in his gaze. "The contract was my aunt's creation, a desperate shield against society. But what I feel for you, Rosalind, defies any ledger or law. You are brave, brilliant, and you possess a fire that has completely consumed my heart. I do not want a charade. I want a lifetime." He reached into his pocket and produced a ring, not a Kelly heirloom, but a stunning, delicate sapphire, surrounded by diamonds, chosen entirely for her. "Rosalind Fairchild, will you do me the profound honor of becoming my wife? In truth, in law, and in love. Tears finally spilled over Rosalind's lashes, not from shame, but from a joy so overwhelming it stole her breath. She thought of the cold, lonely nights she had spent dreaming of a rescue, never realizing that true salvation would come from standing her ground alongside a man who matched her fierce spirit. Yes, she wept, pulling him up by his lapels. Yes, Abraham, with all my heart. He kissed her, then a deeply passionate, unyielding vow that sealed their fates together. This dramatic twist of fortune was not merely a romantic fantasy. According to the private archived diaries of Lady Mary June Baroness St. Helier, a renowned socialite and chronicler of late 19th century elite scandals, the sudden union between the formidable Duke of Kelly and the ruined Baron's daughter became the most fiercely defended and celebrated love match of the Victorian era. Frederick Astor was quietly exiled to the continent to escape his crushing debts, forever haunted by the staggering karma of the woman he discarded, who ultimately rose to become the undisputed Queen of London society. Did you love this incredible journey from a disgraced outcast to a powerful Duchess Karma truly never misses an address? If Rosalind's fierce resilience and the Ice Duke's ultimate revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a satisfying historical payback story, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales of romance, royal scandals, and real-life historical drama. See you next time.